Jayati Ghosh, I'll start with you and talk about Harish Damodaran's point of a problem of credibility. Now, that is very important because when last year's budget happened, a couple of months later, many of the things that were announced were actually rolled back and they all unraveled because they were unpopular, they had consequences. And then you have the conflict over the GDP data itself. What do you think of the fact that the GDP data today also has been revised for last year from 6.8 to 6.1%? That's quite a drop.
Yes, and I think Harish is absolutely right about the loss of credibility. And it's more serious than just the GDP data. It even extends to the budget estimates. Because we now know that the budget that was presented in July knowingly gave false numbers on revenue and expenditure. And we're going to get the final actual correct numbers for the previous year now. So in fact, we're dealing in a no man's kind of a previously unanticipated situation where you cannot trust any of the numbers coming out. And I think that's alarming. We do know all the other indicators are telling us that yes, there's a massive slowdown, that yes, nominal growth has actually fallen well below targeted growth. That is bound to affect your revenues. That in turn is going to affect your ability to spend. So we know that there's a tight spot that the government is in. How much of it is going to recognize and how much of it is going to declare are actually still open questions.
Rajat, you raised your hand. You don't see that there is a question mark on the credibility of our numbers?
I mean, see, you would require peer-reviewed published papers to get into what exactly the numbers are, where are the mistakes, etc. So that's an academic debate. But going into, CSO revising his estimate, I mean, these are structures which are meant to, and they've been revising the estimates based on what new data comes in, how they're tabulating the data, etc. It takes time. Everything is an approximation when the number comes in in the current fiscal year. So I think this should not be much of a concern because we've seen historically n number of times CSOs revise estimates when they come out with the final numbers.
But what about the economic survey? No, because last year the economic survey said that this year's growth would be 7%.
Right.
And now it's sharply downwards to 5%.
So that's again a projection. So do you think that projections always come
if they're saying 6.5 for next year,
right.
I'm not an expert, but I'm just wondering, can I believe this number?
If heavens fall tomorrow,
I have a point to make
you were talking about the coronavirus as well, just a while back, and you were saying that coronavirus has really impacted Chinese economy. Now you see, China didn't project this and keep it into projections that some coronavirus.
Do we have a coronavirus-like situation here?
All of these outlier events can change your projections, and there were considerable outlier events which happened in the last financial year as well.
So I am glad you say that there were considerable outlier events because the government seems to be in denial about those outlier events, whether it is the fiscal situation, whether it's the tax collection. I mean, let's put things in perspective. For the first time in 20 years, direct tax collections have slipped. What does it tell you? Wages have gone down and jobs have been eroded. And to the other point that was being made about the CSO data, the nominal GDP was targeted at 12%. We are going to end up at 7.5%. Tax growth of 16–17%, we will end up at 7.8%. So, I mean, I understand outlier events, but some amount of projection and some amount of smart data has to go into these projections.